E-Mail schicken. Und die haben mir doch identische Namen geschrieben. That's one area like yeah. Okay, good. Let's continue.
Ja, genau. Also, hier.
Please, everyone, come back to the room that we can continue with the session.
The guy will do it for you. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so excited to be back. So in this session, we talk about venture capital and AI. And I'm very excited to have Rasmus with us here. Rasmus can maybe mention a little bit about himself and Merantix. And I think the focus would be to explore also a little bit how does venture capital and AI look right now? Because obviously one big question is like if now everything is kind of AI, how do you navigate this space? What is real, what is not? How do you distinguish this? Also to get some insights in this thinking. And I think Rasmus, you were quite early as well. So maybe just a few words about you and then also how you started the journey with Merantix.
Sure. No, super excited to be here. I was actually doing my PhD at ETH Zurich, so I lived 3 years in Switzerland as well. So I have a strong connection to ETH, and my co-founder went to HSG. So yeah, great to be here. Maybe quickly about myself. So originally from Germany, I'm 34 years old now. Created my first neural network 20 years ago, actually, when I was 14. Built mobile robots, and then decided to study computer science, first in the UK at Oxford and then Princeton. So did kind of there also quite a bit machine learning, and then was at ETH Zurich doing computer vision at Luc van Gool's lab at ETH, basically working on face recognition algorithms. I focus a lot on age estimation and other facial recognition tasks. And I guess they realized that with big neural networks, when you have enough data, you can pretty much solve any task as good or better than a human. So that made me really excited. And then at the same time, actually, while I was at ETH, I started Hack Zurich, which became a hackathon that grew quite a bit over years. And through that, saw also kind of the gap between kind of what's in industry and in the enterprise world in terms of AI adoption versus what's happening at ETH, and that there was a huge gap. Now there's some echo, actually.
There's some echo now?
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't there before. Better now?
Okay.
Better now? Oh, still there.
Yeah, can you try again?
Yes, sure. Let's see. Yes, sure. Let's see. Oh, it's still there. But it wasn't there at the beginning. Oh, it's still there. But it wasn't there at the beginning.
Yeah, we had to change the audio that is a little bit more loud because people couldn't hear it.
1, 2, 3, test. Echo. Yes. Yeah, there's still echo, I think.
No.
Yeah, there's still echo, I think.
Yeah. Is it disturbing strongly? Maybe if I mute, then you can continue. Let's see if that works.
Now better? Hello? Yeah, now I think now it's gone. Yeah, so maybe you just need to. Okay. Shall I start from the beginning or shall I? Could you hear the first part or could you not hear it?
I think we heard some. Let me just double check it on. Okay, maybe start briefly from the beginning. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, I can quickly start again. So super briefly, 34 years old, trained my first neural network 20 years ago, was bored in middle and high school, then studied computer science in the UK at Oxford, Princeton, and then ETH Zurich. So did my PhD in computer vision and deep learning at ETH Zurich with Luc van Gool at the ETH. So I was there a few years. I was involved in the Entrepreneur Club. Yeah, and also basically during my PhD realized that for face recognition, which was the topic I focused on, that if you trained your neural network with enough data, you could pretty solve any task as good or better than a human. At the same time, started Hack Zurich, a hackathon in Switzerland, which kind of gave me the enterprise perspective, where I saw all these like traditional companies basically being very far from adopting anything in AI. And that's, I guess, the gap I found interesting to kind of take what's possible with AI. And obviously now that was like 2016, 2017, there's much more possible. And to kind of bring that into the real world. Then met my co-founder, Adrian Locher, who started Deal in Switzerland. He actually convinced me to move to Berlin, the Swiss guy, so it wasn't the German guy. So we ended up moving to Berlin and initially built kind of a mixture of services as well as product development and AI. And then 3 years ago, basically met a big investor who said, look, like what you do on the investment side, you should actually structure as a fund. And so he ended up anchoring our first 30 million vehicle, which we fully invested. We just did a closing of our 100 million fund. So with that, the first one, we just incubated AI companies. We incubated 13 AI first companies across different sectors in like biotech, healthcare, industrial AI, fintech, very different sectors, usually quite deeply technically challenging kind of problems, but also big domains and also companies where you have quite early on, what's also quite nice commercialization potential. And then with the new fund, basically, we're doing both. So we do incubation where we work with founders, pre-idea, pre-team together, as well as normal like pre-seed and seed investment across AI. Beyond the investment side, we operate the AI campus in Berlin, which is now one of the largest co-working spaces for AI with 100 companies and 1,500 people. So we do also quite a bit of work for the ecosystem with Alex Illich and the ETH AI Center. We've been also helping set up the AI house in Davos. So also on the thought leadership side are involved in a few things. And lastly, we have another 100 or so employees in a services business where we build customized AI solutions for kind of corporates as well as SMEs and governments. And so I think, yeah, I mean, we're ultimately an investor, but I think we see quite a bit on kind of what companies are raising money right now, what what works well, what doesn't work so well, where there's a lot of competition, where there may be some gaps in the market, as well as see from the enterprise side through our services company in our co-working space, what areas where there's demand and appetite to use AI. So maybe I pause here. Last point is I've also been involved a bit in the policy side. So I run the National AI Association in Germany, and so also been following some of the EU AI Act topics in the last couple of years, which obviously also impact some of the AI developments. So yeah, quick intro. I would say we make it probably quite interactive. Alex, maybe you kick it off with some question or specific topics to discuss, and then we can kick it off.
So I think it's super impressive. Like, you were early before the whole ChatGPT hype and other things. How has that changed for you? I mean, you have the campus, you have the company building, now you have the investment fund where you have now raised 100 million. So how these different things work together for you? Like, what do you decide to build on your own? What are the things that you're looking for to invest? Isn't this creating some internal competition, or how do you deal with this? Yeah,
I think on the company building side, we usually partner with individual founders that have not like fixed the idea they want to work on. So it's usually somebody who has maybe like domain expertise, maybe knows a certain problem really well. We recently had a healthcare entrepreneur who wanted to do something in the healthcare space. He didn't have a concrete idea, but he had built a few businesses there. Sometimes you have very academic people who come from research who are like, hey, there's a certain, like we did a protein materials company. We had a researcher on that space who said like there's a lot of potential there. And so we ideated with him around like business cases. So it's usually pre-idea, pre-team. And then we work with them. They come 2 days on site. That way we get to know each other. And then we basically look with them in 4 weeks at 4 different ideas. Also with them trying to benchmark that, but also to benchmark them. And then basically usually try to go into 1 or 2 ideas deeper. And there, at the same time as we find a co-founder, try to usually get 2 to 3 design partners that would kind of commit already some revenue on the condition that we would invest in the company. And with that, basically, we take it then to the investment committee and then decide to invest. And then we always programmatically invest 1 million euros. So I think for the incubation side, I think it works really well when you don't have a team yet, when you don't have a fixed idea yet. And generally, I guess either very well for enterprise use cases where you can kind of sign like big design partners that we can source through our campus or service company, or in like highly specialized domains. So we, for example, started both a tech bio company as well as another immunology drug discovery company, as well as another fertility company where we help scout like highly specialized founder teams. So there was an individual person in that domain, but we helped kind of find the other 2 co-founders and then incubated that. So that's on the incubation side. On the pre-seed and seed investment, I think we are pretty industry agnostic. We invest in all verticals of AI. We also can invest in more technical bets, so to say, that are more on the research side. There we can lead, but we can also follow. So we don't mind building conviction. That's what we ultimately do all the time when we incubate, because we are always the only investor. But we can also join as a co-investor if there's a generalist lead. I think the cool thing about the model now is that we are quite flexible when to partner with the founders. So sometimes we also have founders talking to us during the incubation phase when they don't have a team or case yet, and if they feel like they want to ideate on themselves or they're want to do it differently, we might say, look, like, no problem, then let's see if we can partner at the pre-seed or at the seed round.
Okay. And since you just did the fundraising for this 100 million fund, what was kind of like your hypothesis out there? Like, is it a regional part that you said like we're kind of like the place to be in Europe, or do you have any specific bets, also the directional bets in some parts?
So our focus is definitely on Europe. So Europe as a continent. I think, I would say in Germany and Switzerland, we're quite well connected. We're starting to see quite a bit of UK, which slowly trying to get more into France, which is probably the market we see the least right now. Definitely all Europe geographically, and even before in the incubation, by the way, like founders often ideated with us in Berlin, but then moved to all kinds of different cities in Europe. So I think it's all, and many founders are not from Germany, Switzerland, or Austria also, so non-German speaking. So I think it's been always a very European model, and we obviously know that hubs like ETH, like EPFL, like TU Munich, Oxbridge and stuff, there's like a lot of talent and interesting AI companies around these hubs. I think generally we like AI applications, but not your like thin layers on ChatGPT, but kind of like deeper verticals where you kind of combine AI expertise with domain knowledge. And as such, I think we have three broader big clusters we find exciting from an investment perspective. One is around like healthcare, life sciences, new materials, so anything in that space. I think a second cluster, and just because I think there is a lot to do with that data, and it's not something, you know, ChatGPT and similar horizontal cloud providers will easily conquer. Secondly, anything around industrials, robotics, kind of following the saying that everything that is above 50 pounds, Silicon Valley is not very good at. So I think kind of combining industrial manufacturing know-how with AI, and there's obviously a lot happening also in robotics. We're looking at a few drone companies. And then I think the third bucket we've been heavily looking at is anything around enterprise AI. So take your average company and all the function you have in any company, whether it's, you know, finance, accounting, customer support, like all these business functions, like how would they change and how can you build like an AI company there? We've been looking at some more horizontal like developer tools. We feel like it's not easy in that space in Europe because a lot of the early adopters are usually tech companies and there's just more density in the US. That being said, I think we would also do stuff there. And also on the hardware side, I think also something we haven't done anything yet, but you know, if somebody comes up with something interesting there, more on the chip side, we would also definitely look at it. Yeah, and maybe less B2C. I mean, we have, I guess, two companies that are B2C, so it's not there can always be exceptions, but generally we feel more comfortable in B2B because I think we can easily validate if something makes sense because we are so early stage. I think on the B2C side, it's easier once you have a bit of traction, but like, because we often invest pre-traction, it helps to be in the enterprise where you can kind of, you know, talk to customers and understand this is like a real problem or not.
And so basically, just to understand, like from your current process, like you get a lot of opportunities on your table, like, you know, like what are kind of the steps for you to find out? Like people probably come very early on always with demos, right? It's quite easy to show something nowadays, but how do you go about this to distinguish, is this now a real case? Is it just a very thin wrapper around ChatGPT and so on? Because you don't have time to go in every opportunity and do a due diligence, right? So what are kind of like some questions or some things that you do early on to filter out?
We do actually like a lot of like non-AI things, I think, at the beginning. So I think we tend to focus a lot on the customer. Like, is this a real problem? Like, and are people willing to pay money for this if that gets solved? I think that's one big like, and like there's sometimes also a use case where, you know, you might have productivity gains, but then the customers are not willing to pay for it. So I think really understanding that, and also understanding the second bucket is around market size. Because in the end, you know, you can build highly specialized AI solutions that work for a very specific company, but the market might be really small. Or you can be super horizontal, but then you almost often compete directly with the horizontal like cloud providers, which then also I think can be hard to without the distribution. And I think for a lot of problems, we're trying to figure out, like, you know, on the one hand, it should be a bit specialized and verticalized that, you know, there's a real product around it you can build. But at the same time, the market can't be too small. And also the customers need to be homogeneous in terms of having the same type of, you know, problem, workflow, data infrastructure, whatever you need as an interface, as a company. And so I think that's where a lot of companies fall out because they address a too small market, or the problem, it's one of these things where also, as to your point, where you can have a nice demo and it's nice to play around, but when you ask, like, would you pay for this, like serious amounts of money, you know, people are then a bit hesitant. And so a lot, I think, falls out asking these questions. And I think the other part is like the founder team, a founder idea fit. Like, is there some background in the space, some enthusiasm about the problem, or is it just the founders jumping on the next, like, you know, I did blockchain a year ago, do DAO AI, next year quantum computing? Like, is there like a deep kind of connection to the problem or to the technology by the founding team, and a passion also that we believe that they will potentially work on this for like 10 to 15 years because they're so excited to solve this problem? I think with these things, yeah, we can already kill a lot of deals. And then I think in the next steps, we go deeper and, you know, try to assess the technology try to assess how they think about building a great team, and these kind of things.
And from this stage, just to recap, you're going in pre-seed seed is like trying to be as early as possible, if I understand correctly. And what is like a typical ticket size that you would invest in the early stage? Because I understand for the company building part, there it's 1 million investment, if I understand correctly. But
Yeah.
for the fund, it's different, right?
Yeah, it's flexible. I think we are quite flexible. We call it pre-seed to seed. I would say we are comfortable up to rounds of size of around 6 million, 5 to 6 million. Like if the rounds are bigger than that, I think our fund is just not big enough. Now in the rounds up to 5, 6 million, sometimes they're called pre-seed rounds or even angel rounds. Sometimes they're called like maybe even Series A. So I think the terminology of what's pre-seed and seed, I think anyways has been, you know, very, very fuzzy these days. I mean, we can be in the first round, we can be in the second round. I guess just if the round size gets bigger, our check size is not meaningful enough, because we tend to, like, the maximum check we can probably write in one round is around 3 million. So like on a 5, 6 million round, we could probably still co-lead it. Yeah, I mean, we look at rounds as small as like 1 million or less. And I think generally we try to get ownership and as such also lead. So it's at least 10%, ideally 15% of the company. So take like 2/3 or so of the round. But if there's a generalist fund who leads the deal and, you know, we come more in as a specialized investor to support on talent, AI strategy and these things, then we also find to write a smaller ticket. I think writing a check below 500K becomes then at some point too small and like hard to spend meaningful time on it.
Okay, that sounds good. So, and basically, if I understood correctly, like from the opportunities that you get, like you know, if a startup comes to you and they've spoken to 5 customers that are, you know, excited, like, you know, just trying to understand what is kind of like a differentiation, like to how many customers should you go that you would stand out in the early phase that you are? Like, do you need to talk to 100? To 5, 10, 1? Like, is there any recommendation or ballpark numbers? What would be something that you say, oh wow, you know, they really went out there and talked to a number of people?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think if you are the bigger your individual ticket sizes per customer, I guess you need to talk to less. So if you're aiming at something where you want to sell like a few 100,000 revenue per customer per year, you probably, you know, if you talk to 1 or 2 dozen, it might be already a lot. If your customer ticket size is much smaller, you might want to talk to more. I mean, we had one company in the cyberspace we recently invested in. I think I wrote them alone like 200 introductions to customers. So, you know, I think the more the better. We generally think it's more important to talk to customers than to build. Like we see often teams that build first and then you realize they haven't talked much to customers. So I would spend as much as time possible to basically try to basically understand the real problem that billing is to pay, and then build only once you're really certain. I mean, we will also talk to the customers you are talking to, as well as other potential customers. So to get also a more unbiased perspective to evaluate the deal. And that is, I think, still the biggest indicator. And also understanding if the founders really understand the customer pain point really well. But I think what's great, like I think we can invest in stuff where there's no revenue yet. That's not a problem. I think what we ideally like is like 2, 3 design partners. We usually say 3. I mean, it's a bit of a random number, not just one customer. I mean, 5 or 10 are also great, but there's a few early design partners. You know, maybe they don't pay yet. They're just saying, look, like if you deliver X, Y, Z, then we pay. But that we kind of understand this initial collaboration between you as a startup and those customer group, and kind of feel comfortable there.
Okay, very good. So I wanted to just come back very briefly to like the venture building part, which you're doing as well, right?
Yeah.
So for what kind of people is this usually? Is this also, or is there also some way that people that have not graduated yet could do internships, or who would you like to attract? Because like some people here are wondering, what opportunity should I go after? What are the things that are out there. So first of all, like in terms of qualifications, and maybe then the second part, we talk a little bit of what are areas which you feel like overfunded, and maybe some areas where you would like to have more things on.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think, I mean, we usually have like 2 interns or so on our investment team. Actually, one just started last week. She's from ETH. She did a bachelor in physics and is now doing enrolled in a master's. So I think that's always a great way to do like an internship at a VC on the investment side. I think the other way to interesting internship is that we usually have an intern working with the founder during ideation. As well as then often they join full-time the startup. But sometimes, I mean, they also then go back and start the company themselves. So basically this so-called founder associate role where you're kind of the right hand of the founder, and kind of help in the late stage of the ideation as well as the setting up the company. That's, I think, also a very interesting side to see the buildings of a company from the inside, very hands-on, very close to the founder very early on, with also the option still to just do it for 6 months and kind of learn a lot. Yeah, as plus as many other internships and positions. So generally, yes, I mean, reach out if you're looking for internship, both in the startup as well as on the investment side. And I think we have some people who have less technical background, some that are super technical. I think it also depends a bit on, like, especially if it's on the founder associate, what kind of company that is, what is required. On the spaces we find exciting at the moment, I would say generally robotics we're seeing a lot. Also, generally in the industrial context, we're looking at a few drone companies, a few robotics companies, whether it's mobile robots, whether it's robotic arms, whether it's kind of pure software plays, industry-specific plays in inspection or some defense or some other applications. We're still looking at a few like drug discovery companies, I guess, towards pharma, as well as like new materials companies. So anything around that journey. We've seen quite a bit in like hospital ops, so kind of making our hospitals productive again. We are seeing quite a bit at the intersection of private equity and AI. So basically kind of where you almost buy or maybe build a services business and AI enable that. So, you know, build the next gen accounting firm, build the next gen marketing agency, build the next gen, like maybe customer support company that, you know, with humans in the loop offers the entire service and not just software. So that's quite a lot there. And not always, you know, the pure software part is maybe the best. We look also in some kind of, I guess, more niche industry. Right now, we look at one deal in the shipping industry. We look at one company in the kind of spare parts space. So kind of where basically with AI, you can now offer completely new experiences. Today, I was talking to one of the editors-in-chief of one of the largest newspapers in Europe to do something in the media space. So it's quite broad. I think we generally like this AI plus X. I think AI plus science is also very hyped, also now with the recent Nobel Prize at the peak. So I think, like, you know, AI plus biology plus chemistry plus physics. We would love to do something in the hardware. I think it's very hard to, on the chip side, to assemble a great team there in Europe. But if you manage to do that, I think that's very interesting. We're less excited about, like, I would say, like horizontal foundation model stuff for like for mainstream modalities like, you know, text, image, video. I think there's a lot of funding in there. I mean, let's see how it plays out. We tend to be less active there. But it could be interesting for more niche modalities. I think there's a few use cases in bio and chemistry, you know, maybe also for other modalities, I don't know, like smell and or in the robotic space. So yeah, pretty broad. Always open. Okay. I mean, we always see new things we never have thought of. So that's the thing. Even for the incubation side, it's not like, yeah.
So one application which you get all the time where you're surprised, like, I don't know, was a year where I think like every other startup idea was like a cooking recipe app or something like that. We say, please don't do that again. I don't know. Is there something like that is a recurring theme?
It's interesting. I mean, if I look at over a few years, there was a lot of like, I want to do AI in healthcare. Then there was like 500 mental health startups ideas. Then there was some time where everybody wanted to do something with impact and carbon accounting, 500 startups and ideas and around that.
Before in the session, don't do any ESG consulting, carbon like.
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah, that I would say what else? I think right now there's a lot of AI agent like hype, and people tell me like we build a new AI agent platform for everything and nothing. And then they usually don't even make pitch decks, but send you like a 1 or 2 page like document. And I mean, people still raise money on this, but it's like, you know, at least make a proper pitch deck. Yeah, probably the AI agent is kind of the hype term of the current times. Or like some new agentic framework for, you know, generic enterprise process automation. You know, very horizontal, very visionary, but like very unclear what people actually do.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot. I think we can open up to questions from the audience.
So my name is Philip, and thank you. My name is Philip. So my first question would be this about the incubator role or the incubator that you have. So basically, do a different approach than, let's say, any other incubators, such as I don't know, YC or something. You're basically taking recruiting people, and the ideas are from your side. So what do you see the higher success rate with your approach, and are profits higher, or how is it differentiating from the traditional?
Yeah, I think it's a few things. It's a good question. I think so. One of it, like we build right now around 4 companies a year. We have probably 8 to 10 founders joining us per year. So the success rate of people who build companies with us and then also raise seed Series A rounds is probably like 50%, which is, I think, is quite good. I think the long term, I mean, we've been doing it for a few years, but I think it's still proof is in the pudding. But I think it's much more targeted. I mean, we don't work with like big cohorts. Like it's usually like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 max founders at the same time ideating with us. So in that sense, I think it's different to like EF. It's also different to YC, because YC, I think it's mostly companies that already, you know, there's already a team and an idea. Like with us, you can partner pre-team, pre-idea, which is again more like, I would say entrepreneur first is probably a more similar kind of model, but that's much bigger cohort. Like we also, you know, it's very unlikely that you will found with somebody else who ideates with us. You will ideate with us individually, and then we'll try for whatever your idea is, help you to find the greatest co-founder for that. And so far, we haven't had a single co-founder team split up in all our companies ever. So I think we've been quite good at pairing teams that bring the right complementary skills, but also on a kind of personal level, like work quite well together. And I don't think there's a right or wrong, by the way. I think it depends on, you know, what geography are you in, what stage are you right now, and how do you think about partnering with a VC, incubator, accelerator? Like, and it's not the same. The same is not right for everyone as a person, and the same is not right for everyone at a certain time, and the same is also not correct depending on what you do, what your business is about, what you need.
Good. So next question. There in the back.
So you were talking about hiring people for the ideas you have. I wanted to know, how is that hiring process? Do you have special like things you look out for that differ from the usual, the classic hiring process, and what's makes your hiring process so effective?
You mean hiring for the internships or for founders who join us?
For founders who join.
For founders, yeah. I mean, we do a few interviews. I think interviews are a very difficult format to assess like a good founder. So what we do, and my co-founder introduced it because he did it at his previous company, we do so-called on-site days. So after we do a few quick discussions, we bring them 2 days on site and basically give them the task of pitching a certain business case and work it out, and then pitch it in front of the group here. And basically during those 2 days, they feel like they are already a founder in residence here. So they basically already do that just in an accelerated format, and get also access to all the resources here. And that way, I think the founder gets a really good idea of what it's like to be here, and there's no surprises, hopefully. And also for us, it's a great way to really get to know the person, not in an interview setting, but more in a kind of let's work together setting. And also a lot of people here, because we bring them here on the campus in Berlin, there's a lot of people, you know, who also secretly evaluate them, so to say, because they interact with like 10, 15 other people. So at the end, we collect the feedback from everyone, and we get quite a complete picture of, you know, what it's like to work with the people, how do they interact with others, where do they have weaknesses, strengths, and then also, I mean, we grill them very hard in the presentation, and so I think that has proven to be quite a good step, but obviously it's quite a big time investment. But ultimately, I think as we build companies with almost 50% of the people who pass this bar, yeah, we need to be quite sure, and it's well invested time.
So my question is,
I can't hear you.
my question is, what do you think about GPT-based companies? Don't have like the companies that just added a layer on top of a large language model, and their whole business model is shaped around that. Like their service is just related to a feature that is now enabled because of LLMs. And the other hand, like that's AI, in the UI with easier way to interact.
Yeah. I think like first and foremost, I mean, it's a game of venture capital. People want to make money and, you know, build big businesses. So if that's still a great business, you know, I mean, people would invest in it now, maybe not us, but others. So I think you should still start from a business perspective. Like if you can build a great business that leverages standard LLMs out of the box, you know, it might not be for us as an AI investor, maybe like something we would so excited about, but it might still become a huge company. You never know, right? So that's first. Second, I think we see we have some vertical LLM companies. You know, one is in the kind of document processing space for like a lot of the supply chain kind of regulation that is coming up now and kind of automating that. We process a lot of unstructured documents. I think, yes, you could also do that with ChatGPT. The reality is like, if you do that as an enterprise at scale, you need a very specific workflow interface. There's high accuracy requirements where just this whole workflow ChatGPT will not offer. So there's a lot of product to build around it. And also different models being used for different things. So I think we see that in many LLM applications that it gets a bit more concrete. Now, yes, there's also other companies that just leverage out of the box or maybe just use ChatGPT even internally in the company. I think everything is valid. I don't think there's a good or bad if it's a good business. But then there's obviously less tech differentiation, defensibility. So then I guess traction needs to be really good. But we haven't invested in such a thin layer on ChatGPT yet.
So, and maybe the other way around, one claim is that, you know, with the rate of improvement for AI, Sam Altman also made this prediction that we will see soon the first company built by a single company that exceeds over 1 billion valuation. Yeah. So what do you think about this?
I mean, overall AI increases productivity, and so AI can both increase legacy companies like out there that will take a bit longer because there's so much overhead and you know inefficiency. But I think if you create new companies from scratch, I mean, you can build it all from scratch and from day one build it super efficient. So I think yes, companies will be much smaller. Like you can achieve it the same today, even if you just think with like GitHub Copilot and all these productivity tools. Where you like before that needed much more people. And so I think companies will be somewhat much smaller and you can have much less headcount for much more revenue. I guess Sam Altman is taking it to the extreme, might also happen. Why not? I guess probably we'll see some lone developers that, I mean, we already have that now, some lone developers that make like double-digit million ARR.
Thank you. I don't know where the microphone is right now. Thank you. Any more questions from the audience? Here.
Thanks. So I just was wondering, because we were talking about hyperscalers before, the big companies, the big tech companies. Where do you see, like for medium companies, the trend going? Do you think that they'll remain with the hyperscalers, use their APIs, and then invest into prompt engineering, or do you see a future where more like smaller models will be used, fine-tuned, on the data sets that these like medium or smaller companies have? Like, what do you think? Like, as you know, as an investor, what do you think the trend is going?
I think on the cloud provider side, they will continue to dominate the foundation model side, and I think the cost for you as a customer or a company using that will converge to the cost of compute, and people will continue to optimize that. So I think in a few years there will be little differentiation. I mean, there's almost now already, like with the different LLM providers on different cloud environments that are all, more or less similar price. Yes, there's some bigger models, some smaller models, depending on what accuracy and price, how much you want to pay. But I think that I don't see a reason why this is all not getting commoditized, and the difference will be relatively small. And I think it will be hard to, and also they have an incentive to make models smaller because, that makes their cost structure more efficient. And also they will be able to serve them at smaller, price. So I think we will all see all these different tiers and people will just use it. It's a bit like, right now you have a cloud bill, then you also have an AI bill, and it's like an electricity bill. So I think you will see that. And then there are some, use cases where, yes, you will then fine tune them, maybe also in the cloud environment, or could also be open source on some cloud, or maybe also hosted somewhere else. There's some edge cases where, because your data is so, I don't know, some like biological, chemical data or very weird industry data that very different modalities where you maybe have some more custom models, or if you do like edge computing, where you deploy, I don't know, we have one company that deploys in factories where you run things on the edge and stuff. But yeah, I think that's, I guess, where we see things trending. And so that's why we also find it quite challenging for kind of independent foundation models without the big cloud in the background and the crazy distribution to compete there, even though people raise a lot of money. It might still, I guess, play out for one or two. But yeah, I think it's not an easy race against the cloud providers that have big resources.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. So one question maybe that would be interesting, like before it came out, AI Act and regulation and so on. So do you see this as a positive development, or are you concerned, or are you happy about this? Like, now how do you see this for startups and for Europe?
I have two different opinions. So my public opinion is to shit on it as much as possible. And I'm also quite vocal about it. Because I do think the perception impact is worse than the actual impact. So that's my other opinion is basically, I think the actual implementation of it, once people have like specified it out, there's a lot of standardization that still needs to happen. Like if you read the AI Act today, you will not understand what you have to do because it's so fuzzy. So there's now a lot of standardization committees working on kind of specifying that out, which is required so that you actually know what to do when you implement AI. I think what you then, once that's done, which hopefully is done soon, they're too slow, but they will get done at some point, is I think not too bad. The bigger problem is the perception problem. So what we see, I was in the US a few weeks ago, and it was already a few months ago, it happened the same, that there were some big US investors who were like, like you have now the UAI Act in Europe, you can't invest in AI in Europe anymore, right? And that's their like firm belief. That's the wrong perspective, but that perception can lead to maybe less capital in Europe, which I think is not good. And then the bigger problem probably even is that the perception on the customer side. So we see with a few of our AI companies now longer sales cycles with customers in Europe because the customer is scared that they do something against the AI Act. And they also obviously don't understand what it means because, nobody reads these hundreds of pages and, they maybe it's the first time they buy an AI product. And so that leads to hesitation, lower ARR growth, which ultimately makes it harder to grow quick. So I think those effects are much worse than the actual effects, so to say.
Okay, good. Thanks a lot for sharing that honest and open perspective from your side. I think we have time for last question. If there's any, yeah.
Hey, thank you so much. I wanted to kind of follow up on what you were talking about in the EU AI Act, because you said that your public opinion is to actually, shit on it as much as possible. What would you do different about it, or when it comes to implementation, or would you change certain clauses? Would you implement it in a different way? Would you roll it out in a different way?
Yeah, there's two perspectives on it. I think now it's, now it's agreed upon. So I think now it's important that we do the standardization as quickly as possible, so people actually know what to do and we reduce uncertainty. And I think that's more about speed, because every month we take longer for this. We miss out on things. I think if you come back to point zero and think about how to redesign it, I would have not done it as an AI act, so to say. I would have done it as much more industry specific regulation. I would have, rather focused on, existing healthcare, regulation around the traffic, autonomous driving, around like drones, around like in the defense sector, and try to like amend these existing regulations as much as possible, to kind of say, look, like if not a human but an AI makes a decision, what needs to be fulfilled, and make it much that, because an AI is not, the algorithm is not good or bad, right? Like, it can be the same algorithm that does cancer detection as well as modern warfare. So I think it's much more around purely focusing on the industry regulation. But the problem is they started this project as a big, technology regulation, and then realized like halfway in the process that the technology changes all the time. I mean, they started this process before any foundation models. And so they tried to like shape it around like foundation models that define certain model size when it becomes like, general purpose model versus below not. And so the technology will change so quickly over the next year. Nobody will know where it goes, even people in the field. So it's kind of hard to recognize the technology as such. And now they also realize that. And so it's partially now a technology regulation, and partially it has some industry use case specific things, but it's kind of not one and not the other. And I think that makes it quite fuzzy and sometimes also contradictory. But it's more sexy as a politician to say you did the EU AI Act than you had to go to 20 little legislations and adapt them. Like, you will not make a politician career with that. So it's unfortunately also one of the drivers.
Thanks a lot. One last closing comment maybe from your side. Any recommendations for the people here that are interested to learn more or get more active in the AI space that you would like to share?
I mean, there were 2 Nobel Prizes in AI, so I think there's no better time now that a lot of the research is there to start a company as well as invest in AI. So start a company. Don't join one of the big tech companies. Now's a great time. If you're ever in Berlin, come by the AI campus. There's lots of jobs, internships, opportunities on the investment in companies. So feel free to add me on LinkedIn, reach out if you have any questions. But I think you're in best hands with Alex. So thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rasmus.
Thanks.
We take a quick break. Thanks.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.